All right, everybody, welcome back to Unstuck. This week, I am so excited because we're doing our first ever AMA, Ask Me Anything. I put a poll on my Instagram and I got a lot of good responses. I chose 9 to respond to because I think that's how many I can fit into this episode length. Yeah, and so I'm really excited to get started and I'm really excited to answer your questions. So if you're listening and you hear your Instagram handle being shouted out, congratulations. You won me selecting you to respond to. And for those that have any questions about finding your purpose, getting unstuck in life, creating a life that you actually deeply enjoy, then watch out for the next time I put a poll on my Instagram at Ethan Grant Mark, and I'll link my Instagram in the show notes. And make sure you submit your questions because I would love to answer your questions and hear from you. So yeah. You have to bear with me today too. I'm a little jittery because I'm on my second Celsius, halfway through my second Celsius of the morning, and it's 10 a.m. And yeah, I don't know if anybody can see this for those that watch my YouTube channel, but I'm drinking it right here. It literally, if you've ever had Celsius, do not pour it out of the can. It is a jump scare. If you ever drink out of a clear glass, Celsius is literally a jump scare. I'm holding it up right now, and it is quite literally glowing. It's neon yellow. Cannot be good for you, but I'm still going to drink it. So without further ado, I would like to get started on our AMA. So our first question comes from Bryce Hicks at Bryce Hicks 8. Hey Ethan, I saw your post on fear of being lonely and wanted to reach out. I'm going through a breakup and have been feeling alone, which is fair because I saw that person nearly every day. I have lots of friends that I see on a regular basis, but would like to reach a point where I'm content being on my own. In addition to what you mentioned in that post, are there any tips that have helped you? Absolutely. So for those that don't know, I posted a reel on my Instagram a few weeks ago that went viral. It got like 3 million views about adult loneliness and just how to cope with that, how to think about it, because your 20s is genuinely like one of the loneliest times of your life in terms of the things that actually cure loneliness. So like senses of community, senses of belonging and family. Like a lot of people have left the nest, gone home. Sorry, a lot of people have like left the nest, left whatever town they were raised in, whatever town they went to college in, and went to a completely new environment. And the tactics that have worked for you in the past in terms of making friends and building community are no longer working in your new environment because it's totally different and you're a different person. And you just meet a lot of barriers and you face a lot of headwinds when it comes to making new friends. And it's a really difficult place to be because you just feel genuinely so alone, but you still see people and you're so distracted. So it's just this like weird push and pull of, always having plans and doing things, but still somehow feeling lonely. And the reason that is because you're not content on your own. And Bryce mentions this in his question. And I think you've hit on something really smart here, which is the cure for this feeling of loneliness. So in my experience, there are 2 things that can help with this feeling of being lonely and feeling of like not wanting to be on your own. So I think first, let's talk about how to address not being content on your own or not being content when you're alone. In my experience, the number one way to treat this or to approach this is by truly leaning into things that you genuinely enjoy, because what's probably happened is that you've spent a lot of time doing what other people have told you to do, or a lot of time being distracted, or a lot of time doing things that aren't fulfilling to you. And whenever you do this, you abandon yourself. You abandon like what it feels like to trust yourself, to be alone and to do things that you want. So the thing that you should focus on primarily is figuring out what it is that you genuinely enjoy doing. What deeply fascinates you? What makes you so curious to where you can't stop asking questions and you can stay up until 2 a.m. researching it. Those things are things that you're going to want to put into your life day in and day out. And whenever you start doing those things, you don't feel like the inherent need to seek out distraction and like unfulfilling companionship, because what you're doing is you're fulfilling yourself. You're fulfilling what your soul wants. And so whenever you do that, you start building a lot of self-trust and you start leaning on yourself to dictate how you want to spend your time. And whenever you take control of that, you automatically start feeling more content in your own body and your own mind, because you genuinely like what you're doing and you genuinely have given yourself the time and space to explore those things, I can't tell you how many people I know that would rather do literally anything else besides be alone with themselves. Like they will find any distraction. They will say yes to any plan. They will just go on a walk. Sorry. They will say yes to any plan. They'll sign up for like the lamest plan ever just because they'd rather do that than spend time with themselves. And how lonely is that? Like how sad is that you genuinely like don't like being alone with yourself enough that you have to go seek out others and distractions that aren't fulfilling. So I think like a lot of the times what we need to do is have a bit of a reframe and ask ourselves the question, what is it about me that makes hanging out with myself unenjoyable? And whenever you can ask that question and look in the mirror for a little bit, that's when you're ready to start making these changes. And that moment will come, trust me. Also, when you give yourself permission to do those things, you're building self-respect inherently. You're literally saying, my needs are valid and what I want is valid. My interests are valid. Whenever you build that self-respect, you automatically get aligned with things and people that are actually meant for you versus the alternate, which is distraction and perhaps chaos and just genuinely not being in control of your time or your surroundings. So yeah, Bryce, I'm sorry you're going through a breakup. I know that it's a very isolating time and it's a very challenging time. But what I will say is that with time will come peace and will come this opportunity to truly like work on yourself and to truly sit down with yourself and spend time alone and just learn how to be content with yourself. And then I promise once you do that, whatever relationship you wind up in next, if you want one next, or if you don't wind up one next, whatever, you will truly approach it being so content with yourself and you'll bring an added layer of depth to your next relationship. So Bryce, thanks for your question. Next question is from Mal's at _ Malnee, MALNEE_. I live with my parents in the city I grew up, but I feel extremely lonely because I feel so stuck here and everyone around me is moving on. Mal's, I am so sorry. This is such a hard feeling to deal with because there's no worse feeling than feeling trapped in your current situation and at the same time watching people that you know move on and move past it and get out of it. But I think what has always comforted me in those scenarios is just truly realizing that it's just not your turn yet, that it will happen one day. And I think the important reframe here is to remind yourself that what is really valuable and what's really special about you is this desire to move on and to move past the environment that's no longer serving you. Being grateful for that and like focusing on that feeling and that sensation will help you get through it, because a lot of the times people don't even have that feeling. They don't even have that sensation. They are totally comfortable just staying in their same environment, never moving, never changing, never growing. And just the fact that you even feel this pull to move out of the city that you grew up in and to move on with your life and to find something better for yourself, just having that feeling, like truly sit in it, close your eyes, meditate, hopefully daily, but start with once a week if you can. Sit down and just truly experience like, what does that sensation feel like in your body to think about moving on? Imagine that you have moved on and imagine that you're pursuing something that you genuinely enjoy in a setting that you genuinely enjoy. Like, what does that feel like? Coming back to that, piece of you that you can always lean on and you can always say, I know at the end of the day, my soul is still going to want to pursue bigger and better things for myself. Just having that is something to be extremely grateful for. I went through a phase earlier, honestly, this month, maybe 2 months ago, where I felt so anxious about not having seen the success in the new life that I've started building for myself quite yet. And I was talking to my therapist about that. And she was like, yeah, we have two choices. You can, remain anxious about the future and remain, anxious about the uncertainty, or you can lean back on yourself and fall back on that sensation of wanting more for yourself, because you'll always have that. It'll always be part of you. And just being grateful for that and absorbing it and spending time in it is actually how you wind up manifesting and creating the life that will get you past the point that you're currently at, because that's an inherent part of you and it's a special part of you. So focus on that and truly just like sit in that feeling as often as you can, and ask yourself this other. And my final piece of advice is to ask yourself this question. If what I'm doing is no longer serving me and is not what I want, and the environment that I'm in is not where I currently want to be, what am I willing to do to get past it? What am I willing to do to get out and never come back? And if the answer is anything, then that's your answer, right? Like, you have to remain true to yourself. So start working on a plan to, I don't know, save up some money, figure out if you can afford an apartment a few hours away from where you live. If there's a big city that's near where you grew up, try to think about what it would look like to live there and pursue some of your dreams and some of your passions. If the answer is I'm willing to do anything to not be stuck in this current life, in this current position that I'm in, then actually start doing that thing. And I hate to give you some tough love, but you're the one that's responsible for changing your life. No one's going to come and change it for you. So I think what's important to realize is that the sooner that you start, the sooner you'll get out of this, right? Just knowing that your time is coming to get out of this situation, but you actually have to take action for that to happen, knowing that you already have the recipe and the formula for getting out of it. So I hope that's helpful. So our next question is from Joanna Oll at JohannaOll. Joanna Oll. How do you stay in the moment, even when you want to plan the next year ahead? Oh, Joanna, I'm so glad you asked this, because I've spent so many years truly feeling like I wanted the next year to look different than the year that I had just lived, but at the same time, not knowing how to make those changes and always feeling like I need to project myself into the future and like figure out what I need to solve, what I need to fix in order to get to that like dream year that I want to have. And so there's only one answer to this, and it's a bit tough to hear, so bear with me, but you'll be able to stay present whenever you've actually aligned your year ahead with a path that aligns with your soul and that aligns with what you deeply want at the end of the day. So consider this scenario. Say that you currently are working a corporate job that's unfulfilling and you have to work like 80-hour weeks and you just hate going to that job day in and day out. It is truly insufferable. And you have all of these other goals for yourself, right? Like, you want to be a photographer, you want to be a singer, you want to be an actress. And there's all these things that like deep down you want to pursue, but the next year ahead of you is already laid out for you. The writing is on the wall, right? Like, you're going to spend the next 52 weeks putting in an 80-hour week and making the same salary, probably not getting a promotion, and probably not expanding yourself and not growing as a person. So it's impossible to stay present whenever you have that prospect of a future ahead of you. It's almost impossible to fight that anxiety, because the anxiety is coming from your soul wanting more for yourself, and the deepest version and the deepest, truest part of yourself wanting more for yourself or wanting a different path for yourself. But yet you're still stuck in this planned trajectory that's not serving you. And so what you first have to do is align the next year ahead of you with things that are truly important to you. So whether that's, picking up a new hobby, switching jobs, starting your own side hustle, whatever that may be, the second that you start putting that into your schedule, when you start spending time thinking about and doing those things and executing on those things, this feeling of being out of the moment disappears. Like, whenever you're focused and you're doing things that genuinely resonate with you, you can't help but be in the moment. And so this solves two things. One, it helps you stay present, but two, it also relieves the pressure of not having a plan for your next year. Because whenever you're doing something that you actually want to do, it doesn't really feel as stressful. It doesn't feel like you have this anxiety of not fulfilling your dreams or not fulfilling your passions, because you're actually working on that. So my advice would be to figure out what you really want in life, figure out what interests you have, figure out what your value system is, and pursue those things for the next year, and take note and journal about how often you actually feel present versus what you feel now, which is not being able to stay in the moment. Okay, so our next question is from Eric at Life of EPO. If you could tell someone who is in college what to expect in their 20s, what would you say? Oh my gosh, man. This question made me sentimental for a minute. So I have so many things to say to my 20-year-old self. about the next decade ahead of them, I'll say a few things. One, nothing is going to go as you have it planned right now. Your view of your next 10 years whenever you're 20 is dead wrong. Like, you maybe have 1% of it right. So just accept that and lean into the fact that things are going to look different. Getting okay with the fact that your life is going to change in ways that you can't imagine. It's truly the first time as an adult that you have to accept this and you have to learn how to approach change and growth. And whenever you do that and you work on accepting those things and, figuring out a path for yourself, that's the whole point of your 20s, I think. Really, what you need to do is spend time pulling at the thread of your curiosity. And Tinks talks about this a lot. She says that your 20s are misbranded. And I completely agree. Everyone thinks that you have to have everything figured out in your 20s. And I think a lot of that is due to like societal pressure and to comparison. So whenever you compare yourself to people that are like getting 30 under 30 nominations, you're like, oh my God, how am I going to get there? Just know that they probably didn't plan that either. And it kind of like fell to them. The other thing I want to say about your 20s is you will at some point reach an age in your 20s where the life that you've created for yourself in the moment butts heads with the life that you're being called to on a deeper level. So a lot of the times, like, our 20s are emblematic or representative of all of the values and the belief systems that were thrust onto us over our childhood and our young adulthood. And what you're living in your early 20s is a manifestation of a life that other people have kind of prescribed to you. But you'll reach an age, probably in like your mid to late 20s, and a day will come when you wake up and you realize that what you have been doing and what you actually want are at odds, and you'll probably get depressed. You'll probably have some anxiety about it. You'll probably start facing a lot of issues. You'll probably start waking up feeling unmotivated to do things and like really just not wanting to approach the day and just not feeling like you have any direction or feeling stuck, honestly. And that's because of this thing that I just described. So I think the work that you could do to preempt this, and I'm not saying that it's avoidable, but I'm saying if you recognize it earlier, then you can address it earlier. I would say the work is to genuinely redefine your value system and take time to actually figure out what you find important at the end of the day. And defining that is truly, I think, the best work you can do in your 20s. I think everybody's 20s are difficult because what's being asked of us is to decide who we are as people. And that's a painful process because a lot of that comes with unwinding the person that we previously thought that we were. But that's the whole point of being human, is like shedding layers of you that don't feel like you and putting on layers that feel more like you. And your 20s is the first time that you're asked to do this process. And it hurts at first. It really, really hurts. But the sooner you can accept that it's a process you have to go through, the sooner you accept that, you can start working on it and you can start making this change and like evolving. I really like in your 20s to being like, if you're a Pokemon, like think of yourself as like one of those Pokemon that evolves twice into their final form. Like your teens is like you're the first version of yourself, like you're Caterpie, and then your 20s is like you're the middle version. I don't know what that Pokemon is. Like it looks like a cocoon basically. And what you're doing is like shedding the cocoon and eventually becoming Butterfree, which is like, for anyone that doesn't know, like a butterfly Pokemon. And whenever you hit your 30s and you get past this like quarter life crisis, you become like this butterfly and you start really embodying who you are as a person and expressing that to the world. So it's all a process and it's painful, but it's something we all have to go through. So our next question is from a good friend of mine. He lives in Dallas. His name is Matthew. So Matt Lee at Matt Lee 823 on Instagram. He asked, how do you make the tough life decisions, be selfish, and do what's right for you? So I have a strong response to this. I have an unpopular opinion, and that's that doing what's right for you is never selfish. Because when you figure out what is actually right for you and you spend time figuring that out, that is actually the most selfless thing you can do. Because whenever you do that work, you enable yourself to show up to life in a better way, in a better capacity. And you automatically, after doing that, can improve your relationships with others, your relationship to yourself, your relationship to the world around you, and your career. Whenever you spend time working on yourself and doing what's best for you, you can then show up to the world in a more selfless way because you're figuring out what your value is. You're figuring out what you have to offer to the world and to other people. And so I will always support taking the time to be selfish, to figure out who you are and what you want and what's right for you as a person. Because at the end of the day, like, you have to prioritize showing up for yourself before you can show up for anyone else. A lot of the times we get into sticky situations in life because we start trying to show up for other people whenever we don't have the capacity to first show up for ourselves. And as I've said before, and as I'll say a million times, like, we cannot give to others what we cannot give to ourselves. We cannot do for others what we cannot do for ourselves. So think about that in that way. If you can spend more time figuring out how to do things for yourself, figuring out how to express yourself truly, how to experience your emotions truly, how to show up for yourself, how to respect yourself, that's whenever you start building the agency to then express that outwardly and provide those things to others. Because similar to like an airplane, whenever the oxygen masks come out, they say, put your oxygen mask on before you help any others or before you try to assist anybody else. I think the same applies to life. You can't help other people unless you've helped yourself. It just is as simple as that. And I think, selfish is not the right word to use here. So in your question, you said, how do you make the tough life decisions, be selfish and do what's right for you? You can't be selfish if you're doing what's right for you at the end of the day. It is the most selfless thing you can do, in my opinion, to do what's right for you. And whenever you start trusting yourself more and you start building that self-respect and like telling yourself that you're worth the time that it takes to figure out who you are and what you like, then automatically tough decisions in life become a little less tough because you're operating out of a place of authenticity and you're truly expressing who you are. So nothing that you do is out of alignment. And so you automatically have a framework for making tough decisions. You can ask yourself, okay, this decision, there's one of two options I can choose. Which option aligns with my values of trust, respect, curiosity, and community? And if the answer is clear as day, then take that path. Like, life becomes a lot less difficult whenever you know who you are as a person. And the next question is from another dear friend of mine, Marnie. Shout out Marnie. She lives in Austin and her Instagram is marnie.moments. And she's also a career coach. So shameless plug for her. Go check out Marnie Lemonic, MarnieLemonik on Instagram. She is an amazing career coach. I wish I could send everybody to her that's looking for a job. She always hypes me up, so I figure I should hype her up a little bit. But she asked, how can you tell the difference between being truly lonely, like needing to socialize and get out a bit, versus just being uncomfortable with being in your own company? I think the best answer for this question is to give yourself a test. And, I think that it's tricky to know the difference. It's a very fine line, but there are a few litmus tests that you can try out. The first one is taking an audit or doing an audit of your past week. How often, whenever you had to make a decision or you had to change something or you needed to do a task, like how often did you look to other people for their opinions before you acted? How often did you look to somebody else for an answer before you did something you needed to do? And if the answer is like over 50% of the time, then I can almost guarantee that you currently do not like being in your own company. Because what that tells me is that you don't trust yourself enough on a deep level to let your intuition guide you, to let your deep seat of knowing guide you. And so you look outwardly for other people. So I feel like a big theme of this episode is like, how do I be okay with myself? How am I content with myself? And this is a good test. If you're always looking to other people for the answers for things and important questions in life, it's because you don't trust yourself enough to answer those questions for yourself. And it means that you're kind of out of alignment with knowing yourself and you're out of tune. And I think that's probably the best first test that I would say. The second best is to ask yourself, like, what does my emotional home feel like? Whenever I'm by myself, what do I feel? What emotions come up generally? Or what is the average of the emotions I feel when I'm alone? And I think the answer, there's probably two answers, but I think the two most common ones are, one, I feel at peace. I feel happy. I feel respectful of my own thoughts. I give my thoughts genuine attention. I like what I think. I like the way that I think. And then the second is probably, oh, I feel a little bit anxious. I feel like I'm spiraling. I keep replaying scenarios in my head over and over. And I think the difference between those two is very clear and is very apparent. And I would say, like, if your emotional home lives in the latter, where you're, kind of uncomfortable with your own company and you're a bit anxious and you're a bit spirally, then I would say that you probably are a little uncomfortable with being by yourself. So then whenever you can get in tune with those sensations and like recognize that maybe that you are comfortable being by yourself or with yourself, or maybe you're uncomfortable being with yourself, then once you make that realization, then it becomes a lot clearer whenever you're unhappy in the moment with yourself versus just wanting to like get out and socialize. And I don't think there's any shame in either, right? Like, you're still entitled to go out and socialize even if you're unhappy with yourself. But I would say you do run into trouble whenever you generally aren't aware of this concept of being unhappy with yourself when you're alone and still wanting to go out and like seek distractions to fulfill that, because that's when you start getting into like the distraction spiral and you start living for the weekend and you aren't really building a life that aligns with what you actually want. So yeah, I would say those are the two tests to determine like when you can tell the difference between those two. But at the same time, just be cognizant of the fact that you can at some point be seeking distraction in a way that's unhealthy. So our next question is from Chris at Cruise MTZ, CRUIZ MTZ. When do you know it's time for change or to seek redirection in life? I I like this question a lot because I think this question is getting at trying to put a tangible test or a tangible set of words or framework to something that doesn't need it. It really doesn't, because at the end of the day when what you're doing is out of alignment with what you should be doing. So a lot of this comes down to like being in tune with yourself, plot twist, like theme of the episode. But whenever you're unhappy in your current plans and your current existence, like, that you're not motivated, like you quiet quit, you show up every day feeling stuck, like, these sensations deep down. So really it's just a matter of like being honest with yourself. And a lot of the times that's a painful process and we try to avoid that. And we sit in the discomfort of feeling unmotivated, feeling stuck, because we don't want to admit to ourselves that what we're doing isn't aligned with what we really know we should be doing. So I think I would put this question back on you, and I would say you probably already know when it's time for a change. And I think, this concept of feeling stuck, and like my entire podcast's ethos is about getting unstuck. I would say feeling stuck is something to like be grateful for, something to like, rebrand or reframe, because what it's telling you is that you have been blessed enough to know that and realize that what you're doing is not going to work for much longer in the future. So whenever you know that, then you can start actually talking about making changes, thinking about what you can change, thinking about, where you can move, or like what new job you can pursue or what new career you can pursue. I think that's really powerful, and it's not a scary place to be, but it's an exciting place to be, because there are so many roads open to you and so many paths laid ahead that you can forge on your own. So yeah, whenever you feel stuck, that's when it's time to make a change. So if you feel stuck and you feel unhappy, Ding, ding, ding. Like you found it. Time for a change. And our next question comes from Jacob at JCOB_LCB. How do you design your life? How do you be bold? So there's only one answer to this. And it's from everything that I've studied and everything that I've gone through and everything I've experienced and all the wisdom I've gleaned from those painful experiences, there really is only one solution to this and only one answer to this question. Once you figure out what it is that makes you a unique individual, because think about it, no one on earth that has ever lived or ever will live has the exact same DNA as you. So inherently, because of that, you have a unique thing that it is your duty to express to the world. So knowing that, take time to figure out what it is that makes you special. Like what identities about yourself make you unique? What are your talents? What are your gifts? How do you think? Like how do you exist in the world? Figure that out. And then the only way to be bold in life is to express that radically in spite of judgment, in spite of the fear of being seen, in spite of whatever scary things can happen to you as a result of our society, in spite of the fear of rejection. Like do that thing that makes you unique, share it with the world radically and unapologetically. That's how you be bold. That's the only way to live. Whenever you do anything but that, you experience sadness, depression, misalignment. You don't feel like yourself. You get down because what is ultimately being asked of you is to express who you are as a person. That's the whole reason you're here. So whenever you do that, the way to design your life will unfold naturally. So truly ask yourself, what makes me unique? Why am I special? What are my talents? What are my gifts? How do I think? Like, how do I love? How do I like to express my emotions? What are my creative outlets? Figure those things out and do them 100% of the time. Even in situations where you're scared that you're going to face criticism or rejection, do it anyway. Because guess what? Whenever you do that thing or those things that make you unique, it acts like an automatic filter to filter out the things and the people and the situations and the circumstances that are for you versus aren't for you. So automatically, life starts unfolding for you whenever you do that. So there you go. And our final question of the day, question number 9, comes from Ashita at ashita.bardwaj, AASHITA.BHARDWAJ. Ashita, how do you cope with not having anybody to talk to? I'm going to challenge that question. I'm going to say that not having anybody to talk to is a symptom of a problem that you're experiencing that goes a little bit deeper. I feel like what's really happening is that you feel deeply lonely and you feel genuinely lonely, and you're experiencing that on the surface level as not having anybody to talk to day to day. And I would venture to say that there's probably other symptoms that you're experiencing too. Like maybe you're sad, maybe you feel like a bit directionless in life. And all of these things are because you don't have community. So I've talked about this in the past, but what I want to talk about again is how to address loneliness, which I think is the root problem here. And when you address this and do these tactics, then automatically you'll solve the problem of not having people to talk to. But what you'll really do is address the root problem, because I could tell you how to go find someone to talk to, but that's not what's going to make you feel not lonely. What you need to do is build community. What you're lacking is a sense of community. You're lacking someone to share life with. You're lacking people to check in on you and figure out how your life experience is going, what you need, how you can fit into something larger than yourself. So whenever you don't have these things, you feel lonely and it feels so painful. So there are 4 things that you can do to address loneliness. One is to think about people in your past that you really felt a deep connection to. This might be an old best friend. It might be someone you grew up with. It might be someone you went to high school with. Someone that like truly, whenever you interact with them, your cup is so full. You feel like the best version of yourself. They make you feel like you. So identify a few of those people and reach out to them right now. Like as you're listening to this, just text them and say, hey, I miss you. Can we talk soon? And if you don't have that, then I'll tell you the next step. But doing this is like truly food for the soul. Like it really is so healing to just catch up and reconnect with somebody that makes you feel like yourself. The second I would say is you probably have acquaintances or friendships in your life currently that don't feel really deep and you don't feel like they know you as a person, give them a chance to bring a deeper sense of connection to your life. Like truly give them the opportunity to be closer to you. And what I mean by that is you have to be the one that takes charge in this situation and figures out, how do I start sharing myself and how do I start helping someone else understand me? Because at the end of the day, when we're adults, it's our responsibility to help other people understand us, because no one else is coming to like go out of their way to understand you as 100% of the effort. So knowing that, like, how can you bring this sense of like trying to get other people to understand you to your existing friendships and acquaintances and see what happens? Just give them a chance. The third thing is to put yourself out there strategically. So go to events or hobbies or classes or things that you enjoy doing and that have a high likelihood of you interacting with other people. So what I would say is, for me, what really worked whenever I was feeling super lonely is I went to the same workout class every week at the same time on Tuesday and Thursday. And I didn't just go to a workout class where I wouldn't like meet anybody, because there are workout classes like that. I would say maybe Pilates or Barry's, you don't really like have the opportunity to talk to people. But what really worked for me was going to a boxing class in a boxing gym. And whenever I did this, I started seeing the same people day in and day out. And I was able to connect with them over time, because when you see someone like 2 or 3 times in a row, you can be like, hey, you were here last week, right? How hard was that class? And you just have an automatic way to start connecting with people, because the key here is repetition, right? Whenever you see someone enough times in a row to have the opportunity to connect with them, that's whenever you can genuinely start to make those things happen. And the last thing is to self-soothe and learn how to like soothe yourself whenever you're feeling lonely, like you have nobody to talk to. So recognizing that the fear of being alone is illogical is so powerful. So we get scared when we think about being alone, because we project ourselves into the future and we think about, okay, if I'm lonely now, I'm going to be lonely in the future. I'm always going to be lonely and I'm going to die because I don't have anyone to rely on. And that comes from our internal, primate brains. Whenever we were evolving, whenever we were cavemen, like, being a human means that you cannot survive if you're alone. And that is built into our DNA. It's wired into us. We're truly wired and programmed to seek out connection and seek out social community and senses of community. So whenever we feel lonely, it's because, our primate brains are flagging us as being in danger, saying, okay, danger, danger, you're alone. If you continue this and you're like this for the next week, like, you may not survive. So you need to go out and find somebody to build a sense of community with. So in the modern day and age, there aren't really many things that put you at risk of dying day in and day out. So this is kind of an unnecessary part of our brains that we have to address. And we aren't actually in fear or in danger whenever we're alone. So just knowing that and telling yourself that can really help you reframe this problem of being lonely. So genuinely ask yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen if I'm lonely for the next 2 days? The answer is not that bad, right? So just truly reframe that in your mind and self-soothe and like remind yourself that whenever you're feeling lonely in those moments. So those were all the questions we had today. I can't wait to do another AMA soon. This was so much fun. And yeah, be on the lookout on my Instagram for a shout out if you were in this episode. And also, I might be doing future AMAs in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for that as well. But I hope this was helpful, and I'm so glad you made it to the end of the episode. And if I gave you a shout out or you liked my answers to these, please take 5 seconds to just rate my podcast on either Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen. It truly helps me so much in terms of discoverability and just genuinely being seen on my podcast. And it helps me continue producing episodes like this and answering your questions. So genuinely, thank you so much for participating this week. And I can't wait to talk to you next week. All right. Bye, everyone.